All right, cool. Okay. So hopefully we get a couple more people, but doesn't matter. So what I want to go through today is the part one of the Bronze Coaches course. This is where you start to get into the freestyle wrestling, Greco-Roman, Greco-M, which is our kids, our modified Greco program. Also rule set. TAC wrestling, which is wrestling for the visually impaired. Our wrestling and for our deaf people, members of the deaf community, the programs and rule set that we've got, or the specialist things we need to do for them. And and that's about it, I think, from memory. So really, really, really technical, lots going on. So there is no rush. Pop your questions in the chat box if you have them, or just unmute yourself and ask, because there's only you and me, so for the moment. So that's all good. All right, let's make this happen. I will endeavor to get through this fairly quickly, which leaves lots of time for asking questions and doing stuff. There we go. Okay. So I've got the chat box, I got that, and let me jump back. So it's only like 30, 40 slides. Come on, hurry up. All right, let us, there we go. Come on, you can do it. All right, so like we said, Bronze Coaches course. So this is your second coaches level. Looking at freestyle and Greco predominantly. All right, don't worry about this stuff. Obviously, you know where your own stuff is. Questions, like I said, in the chat box. Assessment, we won't get to today. Don't stress about it. You've got your copper coach already. Don't worry about your sports integrity. Australia update, you've already done your, sorry, you may not have done. You will need to do your Zambia WADA update. So that's a presentation that needs to be done every year. So this is your World Anti-Doping Authority on the to do with the prohibited list and how that affects us as coaches, how the rules change for that year. So you need to be across that. I will we'll do another session on that, I think, because we've got a lot of new coaches, so we might just do that maybe once we finish this. Okay, so this can be done for kids from 15 and up. Okay, so the year they turn 16, we will have them on this. Parents and volunteers involved in coaching, such as yourself, and qualified copper coaches, such as yourself. So they're not going to come to this until they've done their copper. Okay, that in Zambian terms, that's how the system is. You can't really come into this at this level yet. Potentially, if someone was to do the United World Wrestling Level 1 coaches course, then we would pop them in here. They wouldn't really do the copper coach. So what we're going to cover, and this is in section 1. So 7 skills of wrestling, different types of coaches, a little bit on conducting risk assessments and risk management. There's going to be a separate unit to do with the risk management. We won't drill into in detail in this, but you've done some of this already. We'll cover a little bit on the inclusive coaching course. It's sort of disappeared, but for us, it's more in this sense, we will cover it more with the other programs, with things like your TAC wrestling, and with your wrestling for the deaf community, those sides. The ASADA platforms for drug education, again, don't worry about this. This is not something you will do in Zambia. That aspect is handled through our WADA update every year. VET and based programs. So VET, we're talking about vocational education and training. This is about linking the sport of wrestling with a future career for that person. So at some point, a player will stop playing the game. When they do, well, what happens to this person? Do they simply disappear from the sport and we lose all that knowledge and experience? Or can we give them a way so that they can still stay in the sport in some sense, and we continue to gain, as a community, gain from their knowledge, their experience, and their enthusiasm for the sport? 3 different types of athletes, and this links us into the 3 Ps for performance, and also something called the coaching loop, which is really important to understand. So we'll rock into that. Like I said, it's only 40 slides, so we should be done really quickly. What you need post this, so once we finish this course, we would be looking for around about 100 practical hours of coaching experience. This is because you need time actually applying what is in this material and working in that space to make it yours. You don't start learning until you're actually doing the job. And normally this would be supervised by a silver coach or higher. Under 18s must have adult supervision because they're not can't legally be liable for something. They're not an adult. So obviously they need to be supervised by an adult, bearing in mind the adult doesn't have to be a coach. So that's an important distinction there. It's simply, it comes down to adult responsibility. Okay, so what can you do as a bronze coach? Establish a club and a program, conducting basic classes, conducting the Greco-M program, which is a modified Greco-Roman, usually under the supervision of a Greco-M coach. So that's your silver coaches, obviously. Acting as a corner coach at state level or province level competitions. Undertake training to become a silver coach, which is the next step in the process. Participate in coaching development sessions. Obviously, you'll be looking for your Greco-M coaching certification, which is part of this. And act in all the ways that you previously could. That's just part of being a coach. So 7 skills of wrestling. So this is from United World Wrestling. Enough said on that. They are basic aspects that we should be looking to develop as a coach. So we've got the 7 skills, basically: position, stance, motion, penetration step, back step, back arch, and lifting. And we'll go through all of them now. If I am going too fast, please tell me so I can modify that for you. So when we talk about position, we are talking about the position of the individual's body in space. Okay, so we are talking about correct alignment of the spine. So as you can see here in our example here, she's got a nice, straight, strong back. So that means the core is properly engaged. The head is in a strong forward position. She's got control of all limbs. So in the case here, we can see with Cray and with Angel, they've got their arms close in, hands in a nice defensive position. And we'd probably like to see the elbows tucked in slightly more. So they've got balance and control of their center of gravity. So their center of gravity is within what we call their base of support. So the base of support being the square created by their feet. So when we take one foot, we run a line 90 degrees. So a line vertically, a line horizontally, and we do the same for the back foot. Where they intersect, that creates our box, and that is our base of support. When the center of gravity moves out of our base of support, then we lose balance. And so the center of gravity is within the base of support, and this is creating an environment where there is minimal energy for the opponent to capitalize on. They can't actually use my energy against me. I've got good control of my center of gravity, and I can start looking to manipulate my opponent's position. This links us into the next one, which is stance and motion. Sorry, I don't have a picture here. This is probably one we would benefit from having a video in here. So these are grouped together because of their integral nature. Okay, so when we're talking about stance, if we jump back to the previous slide, we look at their stances. They're both sitting low. With Angel here, we probably want to see this back foot realigned to point more towards our opponent, and her physical position is, sorry, who's that? Okay, sorry, I'm not sure who that is, but you're mute. I'm muting you. All right, so when we look at the position here, we'd probably look to get Angels to adjust her position so she's more directly facing her opponent. So she's not creating an angle, she's maintaining a head-to-head position, and shoulders are correctly aligned parallel to our opponent. So again, we're doing this game. Right. Okay, there we go. Okay, so position also applies when talking about ground position. Okay, so there's positive and negative ground positions, and we'll see that when we start going into Greco and to the freestyle sections a little bit more. We want to apply the principle of continual motion. So from the moment the whistle goes, we want to be working. We want to be engaging our opponent, disrupting their balance, and preventing them from dictating the way this game is going to go. Okay, we need to keep them responding to our wishes, not being able to exercise their own. Okay, remember, this game is about control. Same as beach, that part hasn't changed. The game is still about control. The principles from the previous idea of position still apply. We still want them to have their knees bent, center of gravity within their base of support, and with their motion, we're looking for short, staggered steps, or short staggered and shuffle type steps, so that we're keeping this, again, center of gravity within base of support. Now, this is one of my pet hates. Okay, it's called a penetration step. You would have run across this when we were doing the sessions in Zambia. It is used in beach wrestling. So this is where the lead foot explodes into our opponent. So I believe that the penetration step is misnamed. Okay, we don't want a step, we want an exploding idea. I want them driving past their opponent's lead foot and beyond the line created by between the 2 feet of our opponent. Okay, so the idea of the penetration step is to disrupt the opponent's center of gravity and force it outside their base of support. Okay, that's the idea. Okay. You'll see this again, you'll see this more when we go into freestyle. And back step. Okay, this is a skill needed for 90% of throws. Okay, so this is the one and only time we get our kids, crossing their feet, which is usually, in 90% of cases, a big no-no. Again, going back to that idea of center of gravity, base of support, once the feet are crossed, you can't really fold a box back on itself and it still be a box. It doesn't work anymore. So your base of support and your center of gravity are now compromised. Okay, you can't keep your base of support really within your center of gravity because you've just turned the base of support backwards. And this is a great way to score points, but high risk. So it needs to be practiced. It needs to be done well. And again, probably something where we need to put a video in here to really hammer this home. The idea of is to get control of our opponent's center of gravity. What's important here is that we're now moving our center of gravity in and underneath our opponent to gain control of that, so that we can actually lift them up and then throw them into the proper position. Again, skill that we've seen in the development session after nationals at the camp, where we had kids stepping in. So they're learning that back step. So our back foot steps past our front foot, and then we get that lovely motion where we can get our hips under our opponent's hips and up they come. Okay, again, we're going back to that. The principles of positioning that we had before, our straight, strong spine, keeping our elbows in, control of our opponent, that sort of thing, still apply. So we still need to have that structure, yeah? Oh, sorry, wrong button. Okay, back arch. So this is a skill, this is used from standing and from ground. It does require suitable strength development. It's not the sort of thing we can just expect a kid to do. At this stage in Zambia, this would be very difficult to achieve because, one, we do not have the right situation, and we also don't have mats in place that are going to allow us to safely perform this skill. So the main thing we need to do here is strengthen the neck. Okay, so we need a lot of neck strength and neck endurance. So the main thing we can do there is actual neck raises. And often this can be done with a resistance band on the back of the head. So, and just going back and forwards, and also side to side. So with the band pulling this way, and we're tilting our head ear to shoulder to start to strengthen these neck muscles. Okay. And then there's a whole sequence that we would go through to teach this skill from standing and also on the ground. So there's a set sequence that we go through. Again, that's probably something we need to add in here as a video to demonstrate that sequence. And both of those, so the standing progression and also the ground progression. When mats come into play, this is critical. This time needs to be spent on this, and particularly the strength work. Head harnesses are a useful thing. We will have those available. I will make sure that they get ordered in when we do the high performance budget, because you need them. So that's very important, because the neck protection and the ability to execute the back arch, it's not critical at a beginner level, but once you get into higher levels, this is now a skill that you really, really need to keep yourself safe. All right, lifting. So with this, we're not talking about lifting in the sense of weightlifting, though personally I do believe that should be a critical skill. And this is talking about lifting technique in general. So keeping the load close to us, keeping our center of gravity within our base of support, lifting with our legs, and how to control a load, in this case, our opponent. Okay. It is used in both standing and ground positions, so you need to understand how to execute both. And the primary principle we want them to understand here is actually the idea of leverage, and how to use leverage to our advantage so that we can lift effectively, because energy is critical in this game. If we cannot control energy and we cannot make our energy work as efficiently as possible for us, then we will run out of energy. Okay, so the development should be controlled and structured to avoid risk of injury. This is where we need to be working closely with our strength and conditioning side, so that our kids are learning good techniques for things like deadlifts, back squats, bench presses, all these, basic movements in the gym that translate into how we lift on the mat. What's true in the gym is also true in the mat. So correct spinal alignment, good core stability, or as Dane says, dynamic trunk control. These are necessary in the game. Good upper body strength, essential back strength, neck strength, and nice, strong, explosive movements using our lower body. So these all come into play in our lifting. All right, so moving on. Different types of coach. So we basically have 3 different types of coaches. They're different skill sets. You need to work out what's going to work for you. Okay. So we have a technical coach, we have the strength and conditioning coach, and we have the corner coach. As a general wrestling coach, you need to be, in a sense, able to do all 3. I encourage you very strongly to continue your education in all 3. So don't be a one-trick pony. But it's important to understand what you do well. Okay. Some people are great technical coaches and they really know how to run a wrestling room well and get good results that way. But they can suck as a corner coach. Okay. They're too technical, they're too detailed, and they can't give the player the right kind of energy that they need. And maybe they can't control their temper, which is not a good thing. It's not what the player needs. Strength and conditioning coaches, basically, we deal in a weight room. That's where we live, for all intents and purposes. I fit mostly into that world. I'm not a bad technical coach. Depending on the player, I'm not a bad corner coach. But in the weight room, that's pretty much my space. Okay. It's a different environment. We're very methodical in what we do. Everything is structured and planned and controlled. Everything is numbers based, and most of our work occurs in the off season, or what you would call the off season. Once big competitions are done, then pretty much players are ours and let's get to work. Okay. During season, we have very little to do with our players. We will basically only see them a couple of times a week. Okay. And then our main purpose is to actually manage injuries and prevent as much as possible the decline in conditioning. Then finally, we've got the corner coach. These guys are, you've got to be able to read your player and respond to them. Some people are really, really, really good at it. You do need a good knowledge of the rules. You've got to be very fast and responsive. So usually if you're going to be this person, you're into the rules, you've read the rules, you know those things backwards, you're watching refereeing courses, you've probably done your referees. But most importantly is being able to connect with your players, like on an emotional level, and to get them to respond to you. Okay, if they're not going to respond to you, if they're not going to take on board what you're giving, like what you're saying to them, and because they feed off your energy during a match. Okay, if you're getting upset, if you're getting angry and frustrated, they're going to get that. Okay, and knowing how to get your player in that 30-second window, you've got to be able to get them. You've got to be able to get them out of a bad space into a good space, so they can turn that match around and bring home the medal or the win that we're after. Okay, so very, very different ways of doing things. Okay, so technical coach, basically what you're doing here, we develop the athlete. That's what the role is. To the process of continual improvement in athletic performance, specializing in technique and tactics. Okay, so your technical knowledge needs to be ever growing. That is just a thing as a wrestling coach. You need to be continually looking to improve your technical knowledge. You know, you've got to be nobody's worried about your wrestling ability. You finished. You're worried about the wrestling abilities and skills and techniques that all these other players are using so that you can find the right fit for your kids. And then tactically, the tactics are continually changing. Okay. We see this all the time at every level. Okay. New coaches, new players come in with different ways of working the system. And as a coach, you need to be able to respond to that, able to address the tactics that suit your player best, so that when they get to the big competition and they're up against a different body type or someone with a different background, different levels of experience, they come from a different game, your player needs to be able to respond to that, and you need to have given them solutions that are going to work. Remembering you may not be the person sitting in the corner. Always important to understand. It is the most common type of coach in the wrestling community. Okay. This is what most people think of as a wrestling coach. You're the technical guy. You run the wrestling, the coaching sessions in the wrestling room. That's what you do. And reality is some of us are only ever going to be passingly good technical coaches. It may not be our thing. Some coaches, this is what they live for. Being at competition, hey, that's great. Yeah, enjoy that. But the wrestling room is their space. That's where they feel at home. This is where they put their passion, their time, their energy. Okay. Strength and conditioning coach. Okay. So specialists in athlete development. We develop, strength, speed, power, agility, and mobility. That's what we do. Okay. The trainable characteristics. Okay. It does require ASCA certification. At this stage, there is nothing like ASCA, which is the Australian Strength and Conditioning Association in Zambia. There we go. Plug for ASCA. It is usually a club or gym-based role. As a general rule, you won't see strength and conditioning coaches at competition. Okay. It's not our world. We might review matches if we're asked to, but really we get them in the season or when they're broken or injured. They're the two times that otherwise our involvement is fairly minimal. We set the programs, we set the markers, we expect the players to get the job done. But we're specialists in technique in terms of strength, speed, power, development. Okay. So when a coach says they're not fit enough, no problems. Okay. Then I break that down and turn that into something that I can measure. Okay. So different role. And let's say, not for everybody. Okay. It's very much, like I say, gym-based. It's not really a wrestling role. It's to do with gym work and how we capitalize on the off-season time, the non-playing, non-wrestling time. The corner coach. Okay. These are specialists in tournament performance and the rules. That's what they do. Okay. They focus on tactics over technique because you've only got 30 seconds. Okay. So they need to be looking at how to adapt that player's technique to counter the tactics and techniques being used by their opponent. And you don't have long to do this. If you can't work this out, well, your player's going to be in a lot of trouble here. And what's the point of you being there as a corner coach if you can't do this? Okay. Skilled at identifying patterns in athletes and ways to capitalize on them. So you have to be able to spot the weaknesses in an opponent or in your player's opponent and communicate that to your player effectively in a very, very, very difficult situation. Okay. Often these guys are not the best technical coach. Okay. because the focus is on tactics. The focus is on, okay, where is their opponent weak, and what do we do to shut them down? Okay, how do we turn this game around, and we need to do it quickly. Okay. Excels at interpersonal skills. If you are this person, you've got that knack of getting the best out of people. You're a people person. This is you. You can get these kids to engage with you, and you ask them to do something, and they put in 110% for you. Okay, that's going to be, if that's you, those are things that you're able to do in daily life with with people around you, then you're probably a pretty good fit for this. Okay. My interpersonal skills suck. This is why I'm not the best the best corner coach. Okay. So, but I know other coaches who are, look, their technical knowledge and their ability to run a room is just terrible. But they excel at this. They know the rules, and their ability to connect with their wrestler is awesome. They've got a great tactical knowledge of the game, and they can see opportunities, and they can communicate that to their kids. Right? That's gold. All right. So risk assessments. Moving on. Risk assessments are a legal requirement here in Australia. I strongly recommend we do the same thing in Zambia because it's just good practice. They're necessary for the safety of all participants and spectators. They are done before an event, any event, including training. Okay, so you do risk assessments without even realizing it. Like we spoke about or during the camp, every time we come to training, we look around, we're looking for things like glass, rocks, traffic, other groups, so that we don't create a problem and we don't have an accident. And continually looking to review and improve it. We don't just want to accept what we've done previously as, oh yeah, that's right. The place was safe yesterday does not mean it is safe today. Okay, right. So there's 4 main parts to a risk assessment. So the first one is what we call hazard identification. So we used to say spot the hazard. So looking at our environment, the hazard being, if you remember from your copper coach, what can cause something with the potential to cause harm. So we're looking at our environment going, okay, what can hurt us, our kids, our staff, or our spectators? Assessing that risk, assessing the risk of something happening, going, okay, what could happen? And what are the chances of that actually happening? Okay, you could get struck by lightning. It could be, or more than likely be, fatal. But realistically, if there's not a cloud in the sky, the chances of you being struck by lightning are probably fairly minimal. If you're indoors, we can safely say that the chances of you being struck by lightning are pretty much zero. And if you've got almost zero chance of being struck by lightning, then the chances that it's going to be fatal are also pretty slim. Extreme example. The same as, if you're like outdoors where we were for nationals, very open environment, so the chance of getting of a white person getting sunburn is quite high. The chances of a dark-skinned individual getting sunburn, yeah, that doesn't really happen. Okay, but dehydration, on the other hand, is a significant factor. So water, and this is why we need to be pushing kids to bring water bottles, to make sure they've got water bottles during training and that they're drinking water, because dehydration affects performance and can be life-threatening. So then we look at controlling risks. What can we do to reduce that risk of, let's say, dehydration? So making sure that people have had enough to drink, make sure we got water on hand, and making sure that we're taking breaks during our training. I am terrible for it. I start working and I'm just going to keep going. And I don't drink enough myself anyway. And I don't stop off often enough when we are working, when we are training. Okay. So that's something that, maybe you need to set a timer. Okay. Or you do what I do and just go, look, no, if you need a drink, get a drink. Okay. And again, review, adapt, and improve. So every session that you've done, take the time afterwards to look at how effective that risk management was and what you can do better. So this is our lessons learned. When something changes during the day or during the session, stop, review it, adapt it, improve it, and then get working again. But we go through the same process. We identify the hazard, assess the risks, and place the controls, and away we go. All right, so don't worry about this because this is covered in our WADA update every year. Basically, the thing to remember is that the burden of proof is on the athlete. Okay, and you, as far as WADA are concerned, you're guilty until proven innocent. So, yeah, be very careful with it. Make sure you are across the updates when they come out. That is 1st of January every single year. Okay, so 2nd of January, guess what? That's when we'll be doing an update. Happy New Year. Inclusive coaching. I heard a good one the other day. Why are we saying we're inclusive? Who were you planning to exclude? So we don't plan to exclude anybody. We don't want to see anyone missing out. The reality of the sport is that some people, and a very, very small percentage, won't actually be able to play the game and often can't participate in training. But that does not mean they can't be involved in the sport. Important distinction. Okay. We want people to be involved in the sport, even if they can't actually play the game. We've got lots of stuff people can do that is not playing the game, but still part of the sport. So we want to try to put it into ones of, we don't want to exclude people, but we want to get people using their abilities to their advantages. I still go back to the one that happened in Singapore at JAG Sport, where they had some guys who were judoka, and they were actually blind judoka. So they little to no visual ability. Their sense of balance and control and flow when dealing with their opponent was so much better that a lot of the sighted guys suddenly found themselves in quite challenging situations because these guys just seem to flow around their techniques, and suddenly the sighted guys are, staring up at the ceiling going, what the hell just happened? So, just because someone has a disability, that doesn't mean they have a disadvantage. They're not the same thing. They're not the same, two different words here with two very different meanings. Okay. Okay. You've got a disability in the sense that you've got a problem with part of your body or something else. Does not mean that is a disadvantage. Okay, there's ways and means to work with things. It may not be as it may not be the normal, and it may not be as easy in everyday life, and it may be more difficult to learn how to adapt it to this sport. But that doesn't mean it can't be done. And that's an important thing, that, difficult does not mean impossible, and disability does not mean disadvantage. Okay, they're not the same thing. Okay, so remember the spirit of the game. Okay, there's always got to be someone's got to win, someone's got to lose. This idea that, no, we can't have anyone losing. Look, it's a game. You win, you lose. These kids, I've seen kids come through who just losing, can't win. One day they stop losing. And usually it's a bit of a shock for the person who, because everybody knows that this kid's the easy beat. That's great. Until he starts learning, until he's learned every possible way you can be beaten. And he's tried all these different ways to win, and finally he finds something that works for him, or he or she finds something that works for them, and then suddenly, well, they've seen every possible way that you can get beaten. They become very difficult to beat at that point, because they've had all this experience of getting beaten, being on the bottom, being in all these bad positions. They weren't the ones putting other people there. They were getting put there. And so suddenly what happens is they just jump rapidly. And everyone else suddenly has to come up. They've all got to learn these lessons now that they didn't, that this kid learned. He's already learned them. So it's losing is an important part of learning. Okay. It's much easier to help the player who's lost than it is to get the player who won to see what they need to improve. If the kid's winning all the time, it's very, very difficult to get them to realize that, look, you're not that good. You need to improve this. No, I don't. I win all the time. I'm fine. Yeah, okay. At some point, this lesson's got to be learned, and it's usually going to be learned the hard way when they finally run into somebody who's better than them. So age, race, gender, all that stuff is of no value to us. So it needs to be left at the door. Okay. Age and gender are necessary things for the sport. Same with weight. But they're necessities of the sport. They're not actually anything to do with performance. So my advice, leave that rubbish at the door. They should never be used to justify a loss. If the weights are the same, weights, age, and gender are relatively the same, so you've got a relatively level playing field. Well, it is what it is. Race, religion, politics, blah, 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 sexual persuasion, whatever you want. Nobody cares. On that matter, only one thing matters: your performance on the day in that match. And if you are outclassed, well, you're outclassed. If he's bigger and stronger and faster than you, well, guess what? They're bigger and stronger and faster than you. You need superior tactics. If you don't have those, well, you need to learn them. Don't sit there and cry about, oh, but he's older than me, or, they're male or they're female. Irrelevant. Seen girls beat guys. Seen young people beat old people. Seen old people beat young people. The match is the match. Don't go hunting for excuses as a player, and certainly don't tolerate it as a coach. Personal responsibility. If you thought you were going to lose, well, what were you doing taking on that match? Why'd you come in this competition? If you're not prepared to lose, don't play. That's my philosophy anyway. All right, so vet and external accreditation. So this is talking about things like like ASCA. So that's a separate training course that you would do to become a strength and conditioning coach. We want to be encouraging our athletes to look beyond being a player. At some point, it might be 2 years down the road, it might be 20 years down the road, but one day they will be unable to play the game. We all get old. Age, injury, life, family. At some point, you won't be able to play anymore. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. But this course is simply a start. We want you to grow beyond this, looking at different things you can do. For example, I'm at university, again, doing sports science because wrestling. And I deal with other athletes as well. So United World Wrestling has some really good online resources, online training. Strongly recommend that you look at that. We have a mentoring system within BASED. So that's where myself and some of the other coaches, we actually help new coaches with different views and advice and ideas on how to improve their coaching situation. I routinely undertake mentoring myself, and I also mentor other coaches. It's just part of the practice. It's part of being a professional coach. All right, so athlete types. So this is from Coach Dane from Garage Strength. It's a great description. He's got a different way of explaining this, phrasing this. So big shout out to Dane for that. So we've got the type 1 athlete. These are your stable and that is really badly written. I do apologize for that. Okay, so these are your stable, professional, you know, they're the business type. So if you know Cray, that's what Cray's like. You know, she's a type 1 athlete. Okay. Give them the job, give them their program, and get out of their way and let them work. That's them. They're perfectly happy doing it. Thank you very much. They just need the direction and they need to be left alone. Type 2s, these are fairly challenging to deal with. They're often very emotionally driven. So they'll have their up days when they're really up, and they'll have their down days when they're really down. Okay. So you need to be able to respond to that. So on their up days, they'll almost be like a type 3, but on their down days, they'll be really, really struggling, and you'll have to connect with them and encourage them and help them and motivate them so that you can get performance out of them. They need energy from somebody else. If there's a lot of energy in the room, quite often these kids will be very up. And if there's not a lot of energy in the room, or they've had a bad day, they're going to be down and they're going to really struggle. So you need to connect with them, and these will need more of your time. A type 1, tell them what you need, let them go. A type 2, you need to be continually reinforcing the behaviors that you want and the actions that you want, and managing those negative behaviors so it doesn't become a negative spiral and they start going down really bad, because then they'll end up quitting. All right, type 3s, there's 2 speeds: stop and go. And go is 100%, 100% of the time, and let's go. These kids you got to be a little bit careful with, because they will want to go hard all the time. There is no middle ground. You know, you say just, you know, we're just drilling, take it easy, you know, fast, but 10, 20% power, nothing too serious. And they will still go 100% and, you know, end up hurting somebody. That's the problem. They usually don't get hurt themselves, usually. But the problem is that they get overzealous, they're a little bit hyped up, or not a little bit, very hyped up, and they end up hurting somebody, hurting their opponent. You know, or they're the kid that nobody wants to work with because he always goes too hard. So these kids, again, you need to connect with them. You need to be managing them and making sure that they're toning it down. But every now and then, you're going to have to give them something that feeds back to them. Otherwise, again, they get frustrated, they get annoyed, and they're going to leave the sport. Okay, so cueing athletes. So cueing is a big thing. It's a huge thing when you're an S&C coach, but also when you're a technical coach, to establish the framework that the corner coach needs when they're coaching in the corner at a competition. All right, so we'll go into that now. So the 3 P's of performance. So when we are developing a skill, and this is what we need to look at. Okay, so are they getting in the right positions? Do they have the power and the strength and the speed required to perform the move? So it's things like our back arch. If there's not the requisite power in our legs, our glutes, so our butt, and our back muscles and our neck and our shoulders, then where the child is going to struggle to execute that back arch move safely to protect their opponent because they're not strong enough. Okay? Have they gone through the progressions to learn the back arch? Can they actually back arch properly and get or perform a full back arch safely with the dummy, with the sandbag, and achieve that position? Can they do it with the power required? So they have to back arch with somebody their weight. So if they can't perform the back arch with a dummy their weight, then they are not ready to perform this skill in training with a live opponent. Okay. And then finally, the pattern. We've taught them the pattern in the positioning phase. But now when we get through, we know they've got the right elements of the position or the pattern that we want. We know they got the power, but now we've got to get them to move through that position or through those different positions chained together with stability and flow. Okay, so this is the repetition thing, the drilling. The pattern is the drilling part of this process. Okay, so we teach the positions first. The power is done in the weight room. Okay, we know they've got the strength and speed and power because the S&C coach has done his job. And then finally, we then, in the technical sense, we're looking at developing that pattern, smoothing it out, taking all the rough edges off so that we get a nice, smooth, beautiful motion and the skill starts to make sense. We've seen this when our kids were learning the penetration step over in Zambia at the national camp, yeah? Where that starts off a bit, after a dozen repetitions, it's getting a little bit better. On day 2, day 3, now we're starting to get some traction and we're starting to see some improvements. So this is the 3 Ps that we're talking about: position, power, and pattern. Okay, power, there's not a lot you can do from a technical coaching point of view. As a technical coach, you're primarily looking at position and pattern. Okay, power is developed. You can do some things with it as a technical coach, but most of that is going to be, from our perspective, in the weight room. Okay, the coaching loop. Okay, so 2D, C, 2D is the easiest way to remember it. Okay, so our 2Ds. So we describe it. We describe this skill using analogies, using concepts. Then we demonstrate it, or alternatively, if we can't perform the skill ourselves, we get one of our athletes who can, and we say, hey, I need you to demonstrate this. Okay, you've seen me do this when we were in Zambia, where I'll get other kids to demonstrate a skill, and then we will actually go through that process. Then we cue the skill. Okay, so going back to breaking our key factors method that you learned in your copper coach, and how we break this skill down into logical chunks with appropriate cues. So keep them simple, 1 word or 2 words, explode, hug, head up, chest up, turn the corner, for example. Okay, so we're exploding into our opponent. Hug the legs, head up, chest up, turn the corner. Okay, so that would be for like a double leg takedown, for example. Okay, so that's our cueing. Nice, small, snappy, easy steps. Okay, 3 to 5. Okay, try to keep it under 5. If it goes over 5, you've missed the point. Then we do it, or we get them to do it more accurately. Do not, or try your level best not to impact on the doing part while they're doing it, unless it is unsafe. Okay, it's the only exception. Try your level best to stay out of it while an athlete is doing the skill. Okay, and ideally give them time here without you talking or sticking your oar in for them to do the skill repeatedly. 10 times, 15 times, 20 times. Okay. If you're running a session, like a 1 hour session, at most, you should be doing 3 skills. At most. Okay. Anything more than that, they're not going to get anything out of. You're wasting your time. They'll data dump it. Okay. Keep it small. Small number of skills or small target over an extended period of time. You'll get better value and you get better results. And then finally, once they finish doing it, debrief it in that we lock in the key points that we want to correct, and then we go again. So again, we go back to, we describe it again, we demonstrate the change that we want made, we cue it again, and then let's go. We do it again. Okay, and this is the same practice. We're reinforcing this process over and over and over again. Okay, because it takes time for the mind to make the changes to the movement patterns that we want the body to perform. It has to find, because every person is different. We all look similar, but we're different. Our limbs are different lengths, our bodies move differently, our injury profiles are different. So there needs to be changes made. And the mind needs to work out how to make those changes in itself. Okay, there's only so much you can do as a coach. All right, so we're on to freestyle. So we'll get a little bit of a start on this. This will lead into section 2. So freestyle, there is men's and women's. So it is 2 3-minute rounds for seniors, under 17s and below. It's 2 2s, 30-second break between. 3 basic ways to win. So most points at the end of time. The pin, which is both shoulders held under control on the mat. And technical superiority. So that is greater than 10-point difference at any point in the match. You're only allowed 10 seconds of non-scoring time before you get stood up. Okay. So if it's on the ground, they've got 10 seconds to score. If they don't score within 10 seconds, standing up. Okay. And red and blue suits must be worn. Okay. Lots of people don't like wearing the suits. Sorry, that's part of the game. That's the uniform. Deal with it. Okay. You need both. You need a red and a blue. So we'll just look quickly at points and then we'll call it. Or at this lot of points, I think this is the last slide. So there's 1 point for out of bounds while attempting a move. So it's slightly different from beach wrestling. They have to be trying to do something. Okay, if they're not trying to do something, there's no points. If they get a reversal, so they escape from bottom position, which is what we've got here, and then get into top position. So if these positions were then reversed, that would be 1 point. So 2 points. So 2 points is scored if we're going from standing position to what we call to ground, but not in what we call danger position. So danger position is when our opponent's shoulders are facing the mat. So here you can see that his shoulders are almost vertical. So there probably wouldn't be points here. Once his shoulders are facing more towards the mat, there's your 2 points. Okay? And that is what is considered danger position. In fact, you'll probably look at it, you just about give the 2 points here. Okay, so gaining control of our opponent on the ground. So control, we should have another picture in here, is when we're behind the line of our opponent's hips with a controlling hold. Okay, and then finally we've got 2 points for placing every back exposure every time our opponent is in, quote, danger position. So when their back is facing the mat, 2 points. Okay, cool. I think that's, yeah, okay. All right, so forgive the last slide. So next week we'll move on and we'll keep going with freestyle, Greco-Roman, and then and the final week we'll cover Greco-M, excuse me, Greco-M, tack wrestling, and our deaf community programs. So yes, all right. Thank you very much there. We will leave that there for tonight. Are there any questions? Questions, queries, doubtful points?
No. I have no questions, but in the next one, I may come and ask more questions.
Oh, yeah.
I was busy writing some notes.
Oh, yeah. I do apologize. I do. Like I said, if I am too quick, that's fine. Feel free to stop me. This recording will be up probably sometime tomorrow, and I'll post the link in the group. So yeah. Okay. Easy done, man. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Good effort. Really appreciate it. Makes my job worthwhile. And I will see you hopefully next week. Enjoy the rest of your night. Sorry about being slightly over time as well. All right. All right. Thanks, man.